In the mid-20th century, the world was buzzing with excitement about the promise of nuclear energy. The post-war era had seen breakthroughs that inspired visions of a future where nuclear power would revolutionize every aspect of human life. Electricity, cities, and most imaginatively, transportation. These were the dreams. It was during this fervor that the Ford Motor Company began working on a concept that would capture the imagination of engineers and dreamers alike. The name? The Ford Nucleon. A car like no other. A car powered by a nuclear reactor. No gas, no oil, just the silent hum of atomic energy. Imagine the scene. It's the summer of 1958. The American dream is in full bloom. Suburbs are expanding, highways are being constructed, and space exploration seems right around the corner. Cars, symbols of freedom and personal expression, are bigger, faster, and more luxurious than ever. Henry, an engineer working for Ford, sits at his desk, flipping through blueprints. His team has been tasked with something audacious, something revolutionary. They're designing a car that could change the world. "You're telling me," Henry mutters to himself, "that we're going to put a nuclear reactor in a car?" He laughs, but the weight of the responsibility settles in. It's a challenge that excites him and terrifies him at the same time. It could work, right? But this wasn't just any car. No. The Ford Nucleon was meant to be a glimpse into a future where refueling stations would be replaced by atomic power plants. A car that could travel thousands of miles on a single charge. A car that symbolized a new era. The Ford Nucleon's design was like nothing people had ever seen before. It wasn't just the reactor, it was the entire aesthetic of the car. It looked like something straight out of a science fiction comic book. Sleek, aerodynamic, and with a cabin that was situated toward the front to give room for the reactor at the back. The design was meant to isolate the passengers from the power source, for obvious reasons. Safety was a primary concern, though the reality of keeping people safe from a nuclear reactor in a car wasn't exactly worked out yet. But the team pressed forward, optimistic. "You have to imagine it," said Tom, another engineer on the team, as he explained the design to a group of skeptical journalists. This car could travel 5,000 miles before you even think about refueling." Henry chimed in, his voice full of excitement. "Think about that. No more gas stations every few miles. Just drive. Drive across the country without a single stop. The possibilities are endless." The journalists nodded, their notebooks scribbling furiously. They wanted to believe it. They wanted to share in the dream. And why not? It was the age of possibility. Nuclear energy. Just the words alone were enough to send a thrill through anyone in those days. The world was still coming to grips with the sheer power of the atom. But putting that kind of energy into a car? Well, that was something else entirely. The Ford Nucleon's reactor was a miniature version of what powered nuclear submarines and ships. It was small, efficient, and powerful, or at least that was the idea. In reality, they hadn't built a working prototype yet, but the concept was there. The car's reactor would be a removable unit, meaning when you needed a refuel, you wouldn't fill up a tank. You'd just swap out the reactor at specialized service stations. "There's still a lot to figure out," Henry admitted to his wife one night over dinner. His fork clinked nervously against his plate as he tried to explain the enormity of the task. "The reactor has to be safe. Completely safe. One leak, one malfunction." She put her hand over his, stopping him mid-sentence. "I trust you," she said, her eyes full of warmth. "You'll figure it out." But deep down, Henry knew the challenges were staggering. How do you design a car that can withstand the pressures of a nuclear reaction? What if there was an accident? What would the public think? These questions gnawed at him, even as he poured more and more of his time into the project. As word of the Nucleon concept spread, the public became entranced by the idea. Newspapers ran headlines like, "The car of tomorrow, powered by the atom," and "Ford's Nucleon, a glimpse into our atomic future." Magazine articles speculated about what life would be like in a world where every car was nuclear-powered. Advertisements painted an idyllic picture of a future where families would no longer have to stop at gas stations. Instead, they'd drive from city to city, across deserts and through mountains, powered by the unstoppable force of atomic energy. It was a world of freedom, prosperity, and technological triumph. And people believed it. They wanted to believe it. After all, this was the same era that promised jetpacks, moon bases, and flying cars. Why not nuclear-powered cars? Henry watched as the hype grew, but with each glowing article, the pressure on him and his team mounted. The world was waiting for something groundbreaking. But they still hadn't figured out how to make the reactor practical, let alone safe. Months passed, and while the public excitement remained high, cracks began to form behind the scenes. Safety concerns were paramount. The technology was still in its infancy. Sure, nuclear reactors powered ships and submarines, but those were massive, with layers of shielding. Could they really make that work in a car? One night, Henry found himself sitting alone in the office, staring at the design. He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. He knew they were facing insurmountable odds. "We can't do it," he whispered, the words finally escaping his lips. He didn't want to admit it, but deep down, he knew the truth. It wasn't just the reactor, it was the infrastructure, it was the cost. It was the unknown dangers of radiation. Could they really build a world where every car was powered by a nuclear reactor? The phone rang, breaking his train of thought. It was Tom. "Hey, Henry, I've been thinking, maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves. Maybe the world isn't ready for this. Hell, maybe we're not ready for this." Henry nodded, though Tom couldn't see him. "I think you're right," he admitted. "But the world is watching. How do we tell them that this isn't going to happen?" Tom was silent for a moment before answering. "We just tell them the truth. In 1960, Ford announced that while the Nucleon was a groundbreaking concept, it wasn't feasible with the current technology. The project was shelved, and the world's hopes for a nuclear-powered car faded into the background. But the legacy of the Ford Nucleon didn't disappear entirely. The concept car became a symbol of the era's optimism, an era where anything seemed possible. It was a reminder of the time when humanity dared to dream big, even if those dreams didn't always come true. Henry retired a few years later, but the Nucleon stayed with him. He'd tell stories about it to his grandchildren, always with a smile. "We didn't make it," he'd say, "but we sure did try." Today, the Ford Nucleon sits in a museum, a relic of a bygone age. People still marvel at it, imagining what could have been. It stands as a testament to human ambition, to the boundless optimism of the atomic age. Some visitors walk by and chuckle. What were they thinking? They say, a nuclear-powered car? That's insane. But others stop, look closely, and appreciate the dream for what it was. A vision of a future where technology would solve every problem, where energy would be limitless, and where mankind would conquer the impossible. Henry, now long retired, visits the museum sometimes. He stands in front of the Nucleon, hands in his pockets, and smiles. "We didn't get it all right," he murmurs to himself, "but we sure did dream big." Years passed, and the world changed in ways even Henry couldn't have predicted. The dream of a nuclear-powered car may have been shelved, but the lessons learned from the Nucleon project had far-reaching implications. In the field of nuclear energy, advancements were made in safety protocols and efficiency. While the idea of nuclear reactors in cars was abandoned, the exploration of alternative energy sources became more important than ever. Electric cars, solar power, and other sustainable technologies slowly emerged as the world's attention shifted toward environmental responsibility. But for Henry, the dream of the Nucleon never truly faded. He spent his retirement reflecting on the project, often wondering what might have happened if they had just a little more time, a little more technology. His grandchildren grew up hearing his stories, eyes wide with wonder as he recounted the excitement and challenges of those days. "I wish I could have seen it," his granddaughter Lily said one afternoon as they sat on the porch together. "A world with cars powered by nuclear energy. It sounds like something out of a movie." Henry chuckled softly, looking out at the horizon. It was a crazy idea, but we believed in it, and that's what mattered.